Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to the Infatuasian podcast. And thanks everyone out there for listening. We're so glad you're tuning in. Hey, you guys remember a few weeks ago, we were talking about New York versus San Francisco, and we were talking about how SF Chinatown needs some love and how SF Chinatown needs a little infusion of energy. And I wanted to do some shows about stuff in and around and about Chinatown, our San Francisco Chinatown. So today we're going to do that. We are going to talk to someone who, according to her LinkedIn profile, says that she is a constant community advocate, and she's had her hand in so many different community organizations and projects, and just recently took part in the Miss Asian Global competition and was named Miss Asian Global Community Service. It's Kimberly Szeto. Hey, Kim, how's it going?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Are you okay with me calling you Kim?
Yeah, Kim, Kimberly, Kimchi. I have the whole realm of nicknames.
What's going on? What are you doing these days? What are you up to?
Well, there's always a lot of things going on since I did win Miss Asian Global Community Service. I'm always out at more events than I have planned.
Nice. Yeah, I think I saw you. I wasn't there live, but I think I saw videos of you at the Mid Autumn Festival. You were on stage there doing a little emceeing and hosting. Yeah.
Yes, I really wasn't expecting it. They kind of threw me up there because I work with the Chinese Historical Society, right? So we're promoting our We Are Bruce Lee exhibit, as well as I'm kind of double duty since I'm also in Miss Asian Global. So I'm also out there with my pageant sisters.
Yeah.
So you kind of see me a little disheveled because I'm kind of splitting my time in between everything I do. So sometimes you might see me running tiara-less or, with sneakers instead of heels or something. So it's always fun.
Yeah. Can we talk about your origin story a little bit? Where were you born?
Yeah, so I was born out in the East Coast. I think a lot of people don't realize it. They probably just think I'm an SF Chinatown kid, but I am not. I'm more of a New York City Chinatown kid, actually, which is kind of funny.
Okay. Then, do you know your ancestors' background? Were they are you several generations in now, or were your grandparents or parents immigrants?
Yes, so my parents and my grandparents were immigrants. My parents moved here when they were in high school. So my parents were born in Hong Kong. Both sides of my grandparents were born in Guangdong in China, or Guangdong. And I kind of know-ish, kind of like, past my grandparents, it gets a little fuzzy. Mom tells me, and I'm like, okay, like I need to like write these things down. But I am aware that my maternal grandmother, so my mom's mom, is actually descended from the Song Dynasty, which is really cool. So I'm royalty.
Yeah, you are.
That's kind of the furthest back that I know of, but that's only on my maternal grandmother's side.
Yeah. That stuff's fascinating. I wish I could. Sometimes I wish I can get in a time machine. I just want to. Yeah, I don't know if I could communicate very well, but just to talk to your ancestors, like why did they come here, or things that led up to people moving around. I think that's fascinating.
It really is, and that's something I think my mom kind of put on her plate too, because she's always heard like my grandmother talk about like being descended from this dynasty, and she's like, what's going on, like what exactly is this story? Like she was also like thinking like, is it true or not, like is it just something like mom made up or something? But she actually did some like digging and like historical research, and she's just like, oh shoot, like my mom was right. And I'm like, okay, that's cool.
Yeah, someday that would be great to trace it all the way back. I noticed that you're in an organization called Save Cantonese, which is an effort to try to keep Cantonese in colleges around the Bay Area, or I guess she nationwide, yeah?
It actually it's a project that's kind of spun out, and it's kind of like a global initiative.
Oh, wow.
It actually started about probably 2 years ago now, give or take, more or less kind of like for the beginning of the pandemic. And Stanford was they kind of went through a round of cutting courses, cutting like money and funding for a lot of things, whether that's sports, language program, and whatnot. And unfortunately, the Cantonese language program was on the chopping board. And there was a huge pushback in the community. And now they have reinstated the class. It's kind of crazy how the movement itself has grown because something similar actually happened at City College of San Francisco. And of course, the community pushed back, right? I think even especially so in San Francisco. If you are a Chinese speaker, most of the time you are a Cantonese speaker. It's a large percentage. And that's something that we also have a branch at CCSF because someone came to us. She was like, "Oh my goodness, like they're gonna cut the Cantonese program. What do we do?" So we joined forces. So we're Save Cantonese at Stanford and CCSF, and it also has gotten a lot of like kind of international recognition. So I think it's really great what the reach is. A lot of people also ask, they're just like, why are like a bunch of ABCs and like like native Cantonese speakers trying to preserve this language? I mean, for me personally, I wish I like spoke to my grandparents more. Like I kind of just like pushed it away. I was just like, assimilating into school. When I was still like, in grade school, my grandparents passed away. And as I got older, I was like, oh shoot, like I shouldn't have been like so ashamed of being Chinese, of being Cantonese. And that's something I kind of took to heart. So, after I moved here when I was in high school, I was like, oh my gosh, everyone here speaks Cantonese. I was like, you know what? It's time for me to learn. And it's kind of also for me to kind of make up for lost time.
My mom grew up in Chinatown, but my mom's not fluent, but she can have a conversation. So when I went to Davis, they had a Cantonese class, and I actually took it because I wanted to know my roots. He's passed away. The teacher, Peter Long, has passed away. But yeah, I took it there, and I still suck really bad at it, but I'm glad I know a little. And I traveled to Macau and Hong Kong and tried to learn a little. But yeah, it's so hard. If you don't grow up hearing the tones, you're just never gonna sound native. It's super hard.
Yeah, but it's funny because people, a lot of times, they actually pick out my Hong Kong accent.
Oh, okay.
When I speak, especially in Chinatown, because you know how Chinatown, the way Chinese is spoken and like the lingo, it's something you can't really find anywhere else, actually. And not even in like other Chinatowns. I think it's just kind of like the time and place and people. And it's a very interesting mix of like Toy Chinese. Like Cantonese, whether that's, from the village or Hong Kong or Macau or wherever, and English a lot of times. And I'm just like, for me, that's kind of normal because my dad's side of the family is Chinese. So like being in San Francisco, I'm like, okay, like this makes sense. But once you kind of like move out of it, I've had friends like here in San Francisco been asked like, they're like, what are you speaking? And I'm just like, it's very normal what they're speaking. Can't you hear it? And then I like think about it. I'm like, okay, it's because they don't understand Toy Chinese or something.
It's a myth. Yeah, right? For sure. Like my mom, so my grandfather came over here like in 1910 or something like that. Or no, even before that. And so his Chinese was based on like 1910 Chinese in the village. And so that's what he spoke to my mom. So her Chinese is like super old fashioned. Can you imagine talking to an American in English from 1910, right? It'd be like weird English. It'd be super old fashioned. So that's the Chinese that my mom learned. So when she speaks, I think it sounds like old timey Chinese a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that's something that's kind of special about San Francisco Chinatown. It has this, there's this word in Cantonese called gulo. It's kind of like stuck in time, right? And that's like a feel that San Francisco in particular still has, I think. As compared to other Chinatowns in the U.S.
Yeah, and you'll see a mix of, like, so my grandmother was born here, in the 1900s. And so she lived to be in her 90s, and people would trip out because she's a little Chinese old lady, but perfect English. Like she didn't even speak Chinese hardly. So she would have this perfect English, and it threw people off to see someone that old have like perfect English, and if they speak to her in Chinese and she wouldn't understand. It's
Yeah, she'd be
really,
like, what?
yeah. She's like, "Can you say that again in English?" It's really weird. Yeah. SF Chinatown, yeah, for better or for worse, has stuck in the past a little bit, with the traditions and kind of just the way things are stuck in time a little bit down there. But it's a special place.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it a little magical.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about Chinese Historical Society of America. You started interning there pretty much right after college.
Yes, yeah, more or less a few months after college, I started interning. Yeah.
For those of us or those people who don't know much about Chinese Historical Society, you got a quick little pitch on what their vision is and what their goals are?
Yeah, so the Chinese Historical Society of America is the oldest institution in the US and I believe also in North America that focuses on the preservation of, Chinese American history, the history of Chinese people. In America, we have, a large archives. Our space is actually very small.
Right. Right.
But it is one of the oldest organizations. And of course, it's, founded in San Francisco Chinatown, which is the oldest Chinatown
Yeah.
and then in North America.
Yeah. Yeah.
But essentially, the Chinese Historical Society is here to, collect, preserve, and illuminate, the history of Chinese people in America, Chinese Americans, and even like Asian Americans.
Yeah, it's a cool little museum too. It's a cool little space in this amazing building. It's the YWCA, the Young Women's Christian Association building. That building, designed by Julia Morgan. You just walk in there and it feels so homey, and it feels historic. As soon as you walk in that brick building on Clay Street in San Francisco Chinatown, it just feels historic. It feels like I mean, I don't want to say there's ghosts, but it just feels like there's
There are ghosts
for sure.
actually. But I think, like you said, Julia Morgan definitely put a lot into designing the building. There's always something new that I see when I walk into our building or even on the outsides of our building. Like even in the motifs, there's little plum blossoms, there's dragons.
Yeah.
And like when you walk in the front doors and look at our ceiling, there's like, and you're like, you look up, I like see it, I'm like, that's definitely not Chinese, but it also looks kind of Eastern. And then there's like Chinese characters. I'm like, what is going on
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
Because it's not traditionally Chinese, right? It's
Yeah.
not very Chinese,
It's
but
interpreted. Yeah.
it's interpreted of what like Chinese architecture may look like, which is
Yeah.
quite interesting.
Yeah. No, the building itself is a reason to go down there, but we want to talk about this exhibit that I heard about way back in January of this year. I was like, oh, it's coming. It's going to open soon. And then, what happened. The pandemic got flared up a little bit more. And was this a project that started about when you started? Was it like 2 years in the making or?
I think it actually was in the making before
Oh,
I came
wow.
on as an intern. Typically, when you plan exhibits, it takes probably like definitely more than 2 years. I
Right.
think
Right.
I only can imagine that the process started probably like 4 or 5 years ago,
Yeah, sure.
actually. And even just, working with the Bruce Lee Foundation as well, right? Getting the okays and everything. I mean, it takes time, right?
Yeah.
I only can imagine how much the Bruce Lee Foundation has on their plate. I mean,
Yeah.
writing books, being at other museums, other things.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but I only can imagine that's kind of what the cycle is in like exhibit curation. That's something that I don't do. So this is just something I'm just kind of saying that I think might happen behind the
Yeah.
scenes.
Right. Right.
But it takes a lot to put up an exhibit, right? Because you have to have like the initial idea, and if it's like, I mean, particularly for Bruce Lee, right, you have to have the foundations okay with it. I mean, if the
Right.
foundation's not okay with it, I mean,
Can't do it.
most definitely a no-go, right?
Yeah.
You have to have like all the approvals, and then you have to like start curating like what's the storyline you want to tell, right? Like,
Yeah.
what do you want this exhibit to show to people? Like, what artifacts are we bringing in? What collectibles, I guess, in terms for Bruce Lee? Um,
Yeah.
and like writing out all the descriptions
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, making everything look nice and pretty and visually appealing, like where are we going to put up walls and what color are we going to make them?
Yeah.
And all of that. It really does take a lot of time. And I think it might have come at a good time as well because, the pandemic, we're closed and, the past exhibit has been up for a while. So it was a really good time to deinstall, in my particular
True.
opinion,
Yeah.
because it's like, I mean, no one's even coming, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
you kind of can take your time. And I do wish that we would have opened a bit earlier, but unfortunately, right, the pandemic's always kind of hard to gauge, unfortunately, and
Yeah.
still is a little bit.
Yeah. So what we are talking about is called the We Are Bruce Lee Under the Sky One Family exhibit. I just got to visit it. I've been meaning to get down there. It's been open for a couple months, but I've been meaning to get down there. But I just got down this weekend on a rare rainy Sunday. I went down there, and it's just fun because we all know Bruce Lee, right? And he's the legend, absolute goat, greatest of all time. I mean, for all the great stuff that's happening now with, we had Shang-Chi last year and we have a lot of new representation in media. And of course, there's always going to be new projects, but it all goes back. I think it all goes back to Bruce and it all goes back to San Francisco where he was born. And I just found out that he is born the same year as my mom. So they would have been the same age. And so he was born in San Francisco Chinese hospital down the street from the museum, which is super cool. Went back to Hong Kong. So he grew up in Hong Kong and then came back for college at UW in Seattle. Um, do you have so this exhibit opened up and it's just kind of a self-guided tour. You can get a tour, right? If you wanted a tour.
Yes, you would actually probably have to reserve ahead of time because our tour guides are quite limited.
Mm-hmm. But it's doable. It's definitely doable by yourself. Everything, like you said, everything's put out nice and orderly. There's a real story that you're telling. The placards all have lots of good information. And yeah, really, really fun. And so I would like to encourage everyone to get down there. It's a good afternoon. You can go grab some dim sum, go walk around Chinatown, make your way down Stockton or Grant, and then come up Clay. And so let's talk a little bit about this. So you've been working on this for a while. What is your personal earliest memory of Bruce Lee?
Funny that you ask. My earliest memories probably as a kid, my dad talking about Bruce Lee
Right?
because he would always talk about the times he had posters of Bruce when he was growing up in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And he's always been like, Bruce and I have the same birthday, yada, yada,
Oh yeah.
yada. So that's my dad's connection to
Uh-huh.
Bruce and kind of his rebel self, may I say.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of the earliest memories I have of Bruce. I mean, definitely I've seen Bruce's face a lot. I've actually never seen a full movie or TV show with Bruce in it. I've always actually just seen like clips here and
Yeah.
there or bits
Yeah.
and pieces of whether those are his interviews, movies, The Green Hornet.
Yeah.
But Bruce, definitely his voice and face is very recognizable and iconic, and especially working at the museum. I hear his voice so much.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I hear his voice every day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I wish they would do some more releases. You can get it. Of course, you can get it on DVD, but it'd be nice if it was on a streaming platform that we could all see a little bit more of his stuff.
yeah, I know, especially his earlier stuff that are in Hong Kong, right? The Hong Kong Film Archives are actually particularly quite strict
Uh,
in showing the films,
yeah,
The Kid or The Orphan.
yeah,
So
really old.
some of these pieces, people have probably never seen. And
Yeah,
if you had the chance to see it, it was probably, in the 70s in a
right,
theater in
right.
SF somewhere, maybe.
And it'd be
And that
dubbed.
was,
It might be dubbed or like kind of weird production value.
yeah. So,
But yeah, I mean, honestly, some of the stuff is a little rough. It doesn't hold up super well because it was the 60s and 70s. But his impact is what lasted for so long and for decades. For those of us who grew up in the 70s and the 80s, there was really nothing in terms of representation that we could see ourselves on screen. And so, yeah, Bruce paved the way for that in so many ways. For anything you see on screen now, he really paved the way for that. Just the stuff he had to do to get on screen back then is so groundbreaking and so amazing. So, we talk about him a lot. He's really a hero to a lot of us, especially anyone from the ages of 70 down to your age, like even younger. Like, even I hope teenagers now still know who Bruce Lee is, but it's like,
They do.
yeah, I hope
I think
so.
the
Yeah.
kids do. They
Yeah.
come in and they're like, wow, he does kung fu.
Yeah,
And these are little like 3, 4 year olds. It's
Yeah.
quite cute.
Because you've seen the costumes, or you've seen clips, or you've seen something. Everyone has. Do you know the genesis of this exhibit? Was there a person who was kind of pushing this through, or was it just kind of a collective, we should do this because he's our guy, from San Francisco?
That's a good question. I'm actually not quite sure what the genesis of it is, but I know that kind of when it came down to it, they wanted to tell the story of Bruce and San Francisco. I think that's a story that a lot of people don't know. I personally had no idea. Like,
Yeah.
I thought he was born in Hong Kong.
Right, right. Because he has a little bit of an accent, right? Because he grew up there.
Yeah, but even his accent is quite interesting.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, they didn't think about it back then, but I think it's actually kind of a really good time and place to have this particular exhibit because Bruce himself is a unifier. He's like transcended, generations, gender, cultures, ethnicities. And he really just brings people together. And especially now more than ever, I think, especially, during COVID, it's kind of great to have Bruce as a reminder. And he's definitely influenced a lot of us. And like you said, right, like Bruce was the only person on screen that looked like us.
Yeah, for decades.
And it's funny that you brought Shang-Chi up because I'm not sure if you noticed in the exhibit, there's a Shang-Chi comic book that's, I believe, probably from like the 70s or 80s. Yeah. And it looked like Bruce. Right. It wasn't Simu Liu, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's kind of funny how it kind of comes around, right? When I saw it in the exhibit, I was like, oh my goodness, like Shang-Chi just came out, right? That's Simu, Tony, and Michelle and Paula.
Yeah. Here we are 50 years later, and his stuff is still influential.
Yeah, whether that's, in like popular culture, whether that's in martial arts, whether that's in hip hop as well. I think that's something that's a point that people miss. He had a very, very strong influence on hip hop culture, especially in the Bay Area, and that kind of in turn like kind of disperses, right?
Yeah, but he was so the exhibit is really fun. You walk in and you start right inside the door. You see his birth certificate or a copy of his birth certificate in San Francisco and some early pictures. And I didn't know, I consider myself a fan, but I'm not a super fan. But I didn't know that his mom was actually half Caucasian or half she was Eurasian.
Correct. Yeah. And I think that's something Bruce kind of also came to terms with, right? Because whether he was in the US or whether he was in Hong Kong, he never
never totally fit. Yeah.
Right. People would always be like, you're a foreigner. Right. But he's just like, what do you mean? Like, like he is kind of like the definition of Chinese and American and Chinese American.
Yeah.
Well, and he found the balance in that, I think.
Yeah. And, it's kind of sad in a way to think that it was not super long ago, but, he even couldn't legally get married to Linda Lee. I forget her maiden name, but he couldn't legally get married in 1964 and until the Supreme Court case let people marry interracially in 1967. And I think there was a quote saying that he wanted his kids to be American so that they wouldn't have to deal with so much crap that he had to deal with. And it's,
Yeah, and there were a lot of like tabloids and like gossip magazines back then too that were like, this is crazy, like yada yada. I was like, oh my goodness. Like,
yeah,
and like you said, right, to only think that that was only like a few decades
like
ago.
our parents, right? Yeah, it was like,
Yeah, I'm like, are you serious?
yeah, it's pretty nuts. But he did break barriers, so many ways. Like he worked with African American actors and other organizations, and he was always trying to push barriers and boundaries. And the exhibit takes it through his movies, of course, in the Green Hornet days, where yeah, he was, not given a huge part in that show, but he was one of the fan favorites. Like everyone liked his
He
character.
was the fan favorite from what I've heard, actually, and you actually could see it like as the series progressed, even on like those like old TV weekly like magazines
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that were a thing. The first one didn't even have Bruce's face on it, but as the series progressed, right, like he was in the picture, and then he came further and like closer and closer, 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 and to
Yeah.
like the last TV weeklies that the Green Hornet was on, it was just Bruce's face.
Yeah.
Van Williams was nowhere to be seen. And I've had a lot of people come into the exhibit, no matter really who you are, who grew up in that time. They're like, yeah, Bruce was so cool. Like that's like it was
Yeah.
like the only character they could remember. It's like they couldn't remember any of the other characters
No,
from the
100%.
show,
Yeah.
which is quite funny.
Yeah. I mean, there's that video of him playing right next to that exhibit, and the charisma. I think he's like 24 years old there, 25 years old. The charisma, you can just see it jumping. It's black and white, but his smile, his way of talking, his presentation, his body language. Yeah. His charisma is off the charts. And I think, movie producers saw it and they needed to get him into on the big screen. But yeah, it's just such a character, and the collection that you guys got together from not only from Shannon Lee, his daughter, and the foundation, but other collectors too, like Jeff Chin has this huge Bruce
Terry
Lee
Lee,
collection. He donated, not donated, he lent things,
Lent,
yeah,
yes.
to be displayed. It has like how many magazine covers do you have? Like 30 magazine.
There's a lot. That's only a very small handful, I can imagine.
Yeah,
I've always seen pictures of his Bruce Lee collectibles room,
amazing.
Jeff's.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to go.
I
One of
know.
these days, I will be like, Jeff, I'm coming over.
Yeah, yeah.
I need to see this room. It's only a very small portion of what his
I
collection
know.
actually is.
And
And I
he,
really do hope that they also like kind of change out the collections a little bit,
yeah.
and show different other things as well.
Yeah. Jeff Chin, local Bay Area resident. Yeah. And he is probably the world's greatest Bruce Lee fan. I don't know, in terms of collectibles.
In terms of collectibles, I believe he has the most.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
And he came down and do some tours, right? He was helping out at the exhibit.
Yes, he does come in, I believe, about 2 days a week.
Uh,
Whether that's to give tours or to, be there as a ask me about anything about Bruce.
yeah.
He's always more than happy to talk about Bruce.
Yeah. No, I want to hang out. I want to have coffee with Jeff someday and just talk about Bruce.
He'd love to.
Okay, yeah, all right, Jeff. If you're listening, hit me up. I want to hang out with you. And so yeah, there's posters, there's toys, there's magazines. There's actually the one of the coolest things is a lot of the stuff is in Bruce's own handwriting,
Yes.
which is and it's beautiful handwriting too. And it's philosophy, and he would write see some of the original letters. It's really a neat collection that I like you said must have taken years to get.
Yeah. And his writing, like you said, beautiful. I think it probably has to do with his Hong Kong schooling.
Yeah, and deep.
it's
His stuff
it's
is deep
so
too. It's
nice.
not just light stuff, but he was a thinker, a philosopher. I gotta say though, the coolest thing in terms of visuals was that mural. That thing is amazing. You want to describe it for folks?
Yeah, so we have, it's not a traditional sense of a mural. When you say mural, I mean,
Right.
it is, but it isn't.
It's nothing like you've ever seen.
Um,
Yeah.
it has many parts to it. So there is kind of like the traditional painted part of the mural. And then we actually have projectors that, project onto it as well, and also onto our other two side walls.
Yes.
So, and we also have a sound bar. So it's kind of like three pieces that come together at like the actual part, which is a mural of Bruce at the middle and all these people who have been influences of Bruce, or people who have been influenced by Bruce, right? So you'll see, his kids, Linda, mom and dad, and then you'll see people like Juju Chanzito. You'll see people like the Wu-Tang Clan,
Yeah.
who have been influenced by
Yeah.
Bruce,
And
right?
some of their music is playing.
Yes, yes. And then we have kind of this interactive projection that starts off kind of on the main wall, and then sometimes there's also there's a dragon that actually kind of like bounces off the walls, which is
Yeah.
very cool. I could sit in that room all day,
For
and I know
real.
the kids love it. I mean, if you're like 3, 4 years old, they'll be all like sitting there, like they'll be like, "Wow,
Yeah.
water bubble," and it's a really really cool sight to see
Yeah.
and hear.
Yeah. No, I watched it a good at least three times through. It cycles around, but you see different things every time, and it is immersive. Do you have, I mean, besides the mural, do you have a favorite part of the exhibit?
In terms of the Bruce Lee exhibit, that is, I think, my favorite part. We
Mm,
do have another display actually that isn't part of the Bruce Lee series, but we have a group of miniatures
yeah.
by a local SF artist. His name is Frank Wong. Him and his family, they still reside in the area, and these are just very, very detailed miniature displays of just sites in Chinatown, or of people's homes, right? Whether if that's like an SRO, like a single room occupancy unit, or if it's like of someone's kitchen or of like the herbal shop. Everything is so intricate and very detailed. And for me, I think a lot of it is just, it kind of brings back my memories too,
Yeah.
of just like how like I was raised by my parents and my grandparents, right? There's one scene, there's a fridge, and then I think there's like a mooncake box on top of the fridge. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, that's so funny.
Yeah.
Like, because my grandparents and parents would always put stuff on top of the fridge when I was growing
Get your
up.
sewing kit in there or coupons or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
exactly. And it's like it's in like the blue Danish cookie
Yeah. Yeah.
box,
Yeah.
or the
Exactly.
or
Exactly.
something, and it's like the sewing kit and not really cookies. And you're like, where are the cookies?
Yeah. Classic. Yeah.
um, but those miniatures are definitely loved by like the little ones because they're actually at eye level for the kids to see, as
Yeah, it
well as
is.
the adults also really like them too. I can see, like, I see people standing there for so long because they're trying to like take everything in, because it's like a 3D I Spy book essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's done extremely extremely well.
Yeah. And it's also East meets West, right? It's like an American kitchen, but it's a Chinese American family. So,
Right? Yeah.
yeah.
It's very cool. It'll be like, right, like it'll be like the Christmas tree is probably there all year,
Right,
right? And then like
right.
you have the mahjong table on the side, but
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
you'll also see like Skippy peanut butter, See's
Right.
candy,
Right.
spam, right, mixed in with like the dumplings and mooncakes and dim sum and whatnot that's on the
Exactly.
table,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is very, I think, nostalgic too. I think that's probably also why I really like it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
because these are all things of my childhood and even my life now.
Yeah. I really like the way that you guys really tried to work in some interactive elements of it where people get to write messages. There's boards that you can break, kind of
Yes.
karate style, and you can break these. You can write messages on the board and break them, and they're kind of laying around there for people to read. There's chalk walls, there's notebooks, there's more current stuff downstairs, graffiti artists and other stuff going on downstairs. So it's really a fun afternoon. It's not huge, don't expect the De Young Museum or something really big, but it's intimate. You can interact with the other guests, the other visitors too, because you're right there. There's not hundreds of people there, but it's just kind of fun. Like I had a couple conversations with people like, oh yeah, I remember this, and he was like, oh, I remember that. It was an African American guy, and we were looking at the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar scene from the movie where he gets that big giant footprint on his chest, and we were
Yeah.
talking about, I remember that when I was a kid and how crazy that was. And it's kind of cool to see, there's other people who love Bruce as much as you do, and want to talk about him and keep his memory alive. And I think the museum just gives you an opportunity to have these kinds of conversations with your kids, with your friends, with your uncles, your grandparents. You can Bruce crosses generations, and it's really cool.
Yeah, he really does. And a lot of people who come in too, they also know Bruce, or have had family members or someone that knew Bruce. And I think it kind of also goes to show like the locality of the museum itself.
Yeah.
And people will be like, yeah, like I remember Bruce, blah 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 blah. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's cool.
and and you had Shannon come down there, and Shannon was there for the opening. Shannon Lee, his daughter, I think she's same age as me, which is kind of cool because Bruce is the same age as my mom, and Shannon's the same age as me. And so she put her stamp is all over this. You can see a couple of videos with her talking about her dad, and she also talks about looking forward with her show Warrior, which she helped to produce. And so, have you met Shannon? Have you had conversations with Shannon?
I've met Shannon. I actually remember it very clearly. It was a very hectic day. It was our opening night. And, I'm kind of like fast walking down our narrow hallway. And I stop because I see these feet on the ground, and I look up, and Shannon's wearing a very cute floral green dress. And I'm like, I'm like, a little like, starstruck.
Right,
I'm like,
right.
oh my goodness, it's Shannon Lee.
Yeah.
And that's more or less kind of where my interaction ended. I was kind of like, oh, nice to meet you. And then, kind of on my way. And then to also kind of help set up her little signing event. She did a quick signing. She didn't do it with other people around, but with like staff around. We do still have some of her signed merchandise in our store. But that was my interaction with Shannon. That I probably only said, "Hi, Shannon, nice to meet you." That's it. That's probably where it ended. I was like, still like, "Oh my gosh."
That's the problem. Yeah, you're too tongue tied to actually say anything meaningful. Oh
Yeah.
man, yeah. No, she's on my. I have a very short list of people I'd love to get on the podcast, and she has her own podcast, so people can listen to her. But yeah, oh man, she would be great to have on the podcast. She's a local legend. So everyone should get down to Chinatown and get over to the Chinese Historical Society of America Museum and pop in there. And there are every so often there's special events. There was a teachers event. I missed it. But there was a teachers event. So every so often keep your finger on that website or Instagram so you can know about special stuff going on down there. So we usually end our interviews by asking our guests to elevate someone in the Asian community. We call this who is your infatuation? And so, Kim Szeto, who is your infatuation?
Yeah, so my infatuation, some people might actually know who this person is. His name is Eric Nam.
Uh-huh.
He's a Korean American singer, songwriter, producer. You might also know him as like a K-pop idol. For me, his story is just very inspirational as like a Korean American, right? The immigrant story, kind of following the paths of, what it is to be like, an Asian in America, right? So he goes to college, ends up working at Deloitte, right? And then, gives it up to become a singer in Korea.
Yeah.
And, really to make a name for himself. And after he now he's back in the States making, music here in the States. It's kind of like a nice homecoming story. And him in particular, I think why I really, really like him is he speaks to issues in Asian American society, whether that's, Asian American hate or just even, like Asian Americans talking about like mental health, right? He talks about these things that might be taboo to talk about or things that people don't particularly want to talk about, but these are definitely issues that need to be highlighted, whether it's about, violence against Asian Americans or mental health or the more serious things. But also he's a very fun, genuine guy in person. I've actually been very blessed to meet him twice.
Oh, really?
At his concert, and he's very down to earth, very funny.
Seems like it. Yeah.
I really wish, like, I want to be friends with you, Eric.
I know.
Hearing this, you just seem like a really cool person.
He really does.
And
yeah.
He's my infatuation.
yeah. He's got that approachability. I saw an interview with him. It was really funny. He was talking about how, like you said, he started out in business. And then he made the shift into entertainment, and his mom was kind of like, I'm not sure. And then so he had to show his mom like how he's really popular in Korea and how he's blowing up. His mom finally kind of got on board when she saw he had like this many views or this many subscribers and stuff.
Yeah, but mom's always probably going to be like, so when are you getting a real job?
When are you getting a real job? Yeah. Yeah, that's on brand. That's typical for Asian moms out there. But yeah, good choice, Eric Nam. It's too bad he's not very good looking, though, right?
I think he's very good looking.
Just kidding. He is a cutie, yeah. So we had a real good time talking with you, Kim. Thanks for coming along.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. No, it's always good to, I feel like even though we're different ages and, we have different experiences, it's always fun to talk about people who kind of, just have the passion for our community and passion for, that's kind of why we started this podcast, just to talk to people and elevate and amplify voices of Asian creators. So thanks for all that you do.
Yes, thanks for what you do as well.
Thank you. So on behalf of Kimberly and myself, we hope that you all out there are happy, healthy, and safe. And we will talk to you again soon. So until we do, bye.
Bye.